Sheikh Hamdan was caught, and the palace covered it up. He was caught, not by a journalist, not by a rival, not by anyone who was looking for something to use against him. He was caught the way people are always caught when they are living two lives at once. By ordinary circumstance, by a moment that was not supposed to happen the way it happened, by the simple fact that secrets, no matter how carefully kept, have a way of surfacing at exactly the wrong time. And when it happened, when the thing that was supposed to stay hidden stepped into the light, the palace moved quickly, efficiently, with the practiced precision of an institution that has been managing inconvenient truths for generations. The story was contained. The moment was buried. And the world was never supposed to find out that any of it had happened. But it did happen. And this is the story of what was found, what was covered, and what it cost everyone involved. To understand what happened, you have to understand the life Hamdan was living in the years leading up to it. On the surface, the public surface, the managed surface, everything looked exactly the way it was supposed to look. The Crown Prince of Dubai was fulfilling his duties, attending events, competing in endurance races, posting poetry that made millions of people feel something they could not fully explain. The image was intact. The image was always intact because the people responsible for maintaining it are very good at their jobs. And because Hamdan himself, whatever he is carrying privately, has always understood the requirement to perform composure in public. But underneath the surface, his life was far more complicated than anything the official image conveyed. He was in love with someone the palace had not approved of, had been in love with her for years, had built a private connection with her that existed in the spaces between his public life, in the quiet hours, in the private communications, in the moments when the crown prince could set down the crown and simply be a person with feelings that he had not been given permission to act on openly. And that private connection, that carefully hidden, deliberately kept separate part of his life, was exactly what the moment of exposure revealed. The details of how it happened are the kind of thing that the palace worked very hard to ensure never became fully public. But the outline is there for anyone who has been following this story closely enough to read between the official lines. There was a moment of visibilities that was not planned, a crossing of the two worlds Hamdan was living in, the public world and the private one. That happened in a way neither he nor the people around him had anticipated and could not immediately control. Someone saw something, or something was seen by someone it was never supposed to reach. And the information moved the way information always moves when it involves someone at this level of public life. Quickly, dangerously, and in a direction that threatened to become a story the palace could not write the ending to. The response was immediate. That is the thing about how institutions like the Al Maktoum family operate when something threatens the managed image of the crown. There is no deliberation. There is no waiting to see what happens next. The machinery activates. People are called. Decisions are made in rooms that the outside world will never have access to. And the situation, whatever shape it was taking in that moment of exposure, is addressed with the kind of speed and completeness that leaves very little trace for anyone looking from the outside to follow. What exactly was covered matters less than the fact that it was covered at all. Because the covering, the active, deliberate suppression of something that had briefly threatened to become visible, tells its own story. It tells you that what was found was significant enough to require that level of response. Significant enough that the normal management tools, the carefully worded non statements, the strategic silences, the photographs released at precisely the right moment to redirect attention were not going to be sufficient. Something more direct was required, and something more direct is what happened. The woman at the center of it was handled the way women in these situations are always handled in royal circles. Not cruelly, not with any visible drama, just managed, moved, repositioned within the story in a way that reduced her visibility and her proximity to Hamdan without creating the kind of public rupture that would have raised more questions than it answered. She did not disappear overnight. She faded gradually and then completely. The way things fade when powerful people decide they need to be less visible and have the resources to make that happen without leaving obvious evidence of the decision behind. Hamdan's behavior in the period immediately following the exposure was noted by the people who pay close attention to the gaps in his public presence. He was quieter than usual. The posts became slightly less frequent. The public appearances continued. They always continue. But there was a quality to him in that period that the people who follow him closely recognize as different from his usual composure. Not broken, not publicly distressed, but carrying something heavier than normal even by his standards. The way a person carries something when they have just been reminded in the most direct possible terms that they do not have the freedom to live their private life on their own terms. His poetry from that period is some of the most raw work he has ever released. Poems about walls, about cages that look like palaces, about loving something that the world will not let you keep in the open, about the specific exhaustion of performing one life in public while carrying a completely different one in private. Most people read those poems and felt moved without understanding precisely what moved them. But the people who knew what had happened, the people close enough to the situation to understand the context, read those poems and understood exactly what they were documenting. The palace covered it up successfully. That is the honest conclusion. The world did not get the full story at the time it was happening. The official image held the carefully managed version of Sheikh Hamdan as the composed, dignified, admirably private Crown Prince of Dubai continued without visible interruption. The machinery worked the way it was designed to work, and the woman involved, whatever she felt about the way things ended, disappeared from the story the way people disappear when an institution decides their presence is inconvenient. But here is what the palace cannot cover up, no matter how efficient the machinery becomes. The poems exist. Every word Hamdan has written since that period carries the weight of what happened, not explicitly, not in any way that could be pointed to as evidence of anything specific, but in the way that honest writing always carries the weight of the life that produced it. He was caught, the palace covered it up. And the man who writes poetry about cages and walls and loving things you are not permitted to keep in the open. That man has been writing about it ever since. Subscribe to this channel and hit the bell. Every week I bring you the story behind the story of Sheikh Hamdan. The moments the palace covered, the truths that survived anyway, and the poetry that says everything the official version never will.